And now, the lowdown, with economist and political strategist Elson Low.
Hello, Guyana, and welcome to the Lowdown. It's always fun to be here with you. Welcome to the Lowdown. Folks, you know I'm going to say it, share that link, Let's give everyone a chance to see the show. Folks, today we've got, we always like to have some fun. Today we've got all different flavors of fun, folks. We've got the Building Expo and some of the controversies around that. We've also got an issue that really didn't need to be blown up as big as it has blown up if the government had just taken reasonable actions, but it has blown up. We're going to talk about that. It concerns the relinquishment of certain oil blocks. And we're going to, folks, that Jumbie bird keeps coming back up, folks. We're gonna touch on that same Jumbie bird because it is a great metaphor for much of what the government does when it tries to govern. So, folks, share the link, share that link. Let's bring everyone into the show. We're gonna have some fun here tonight. We've got some of it is funny but tragic, but you know that often is the case here. So, folks, share that link. We're gonna have a fun chat. Thank you for joining us here. Thank you for spending your Saturday night here with us. Thank you for starting your Saturday night on a high here with Elson Low. Of course, I'm your host, Elson Low. So, folks, we are going to have an interesting show. We're going to talk about oil. We got to talk about the oil. We're going to talk about some of the things that have developed over the course of the past week or so. We're going to talk about the way that basic things are not being done, and it is extremely alarming. We're gonna go over all of that, folks. We're also going to talk a bit about different dimensions of the Building Expo, some of the president's actions, which have really, I think, concerned a lot of Guyanese and corroborate reports that we've been getting from PUP supporters and party members across the country whenever the president goes on outreaches. So that is going to be an interesting segment of the show as well. Some of you may have seen the recording of the president grabbing and really shoving what appears to be a security guard for the president in front of what appears to be the U.S. ambassador, the former U.S. ambassador. So, folks, we're gonna get into that in a second. Alarming, we gotta get into these things. But we always like to have a good time here on the Lowdown to go over these incidents, to go over what's going on in the country, to help you get a better understanding of what's going on. And of course, what it means for you in your daily life, folks. What it means for you. So share the link. Let's bring everyone in. Let's give everyone a chance to see the show. We love having a good time here on the Lowdown. Thank you for being here with me, Elson Low, your host. Thank you for being here for another Saturday. And we're going to have a fun chat, folks. Some of this stuff, I'm a little bit disturbed by what I saw with the president, so we'll go into that. But for the first bit of it, we're gonna jump into our first meme of the week. We start off with some memes, so let's get going. And our first meme of the week will be up there in a second, folks. You'll be able to see that. There it is. Are we good to go there, operator? Yes, there we go. Someone says, if it's not CPL stressing me out, it's GPL. Goodness, GPL. There've been some long blackouts in the past few days. Not even having particularly bad weather, but long blackouts. Sometimes the blackouts before the weather kicks up. Really disturbing. And the question is, are we just going to continue to see people being stressed out by GPL? it is really alarming. Another person was remarking that if GPL could kindly turn on the sun before they give these blackouts, because it is terrible when you don't have any current and that sun is beaten down. We've had a hot summer here in Guyana. In fact, last month is the hottest month on record in the entire history, as long as we've been keeping records. And so, quite rightly, citizens are saying if GPL could kindly turn on the sun before giving us blackout, we'd appreciate it. Goodness me, goodness me. And one of the things, of course, I'm sure the people in GPL are trying their best. They're just being mismanaged by the government there. But one of the interesting things that we want to point out to you guys again is that the government is spending billions of dollars on a new source of electricity. But it would seem to me that the first priority is ensuring that you have stable electricity currently before you go and add capacity. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have all the electricity you want, but it's not going to be available because GPL is going to continue to have blackouts. That to me needs to be an area of focus. I believe they've gone to Parliament for some funds towards that, but we haven't seen improvements in the past when they've gone to Parliament for funds. For GPL, we haven't seen GPL actually make progress, any substantial progress. I can't believe that the government is going to focus on the provision of more electricity. They say cheaper, remains to be seen, electricity, without addressing the blackout problem. It seems to me to be utterly ridiculous. So people are going to have to keep being stressed out. Of course, it's CPL season. Guyana Amazon Warriors having won, I believe, their first match. Very pleased for the Warriors. Less so about GPL's performance. But that's not all, folks. That's not all. Let's jump across to the next meme here as we see. So now GPL at the Building Expo, that is this weekend. GPL says, serving you at the Building Expo. Check us out. My, I gotta say, GPL's had a lot of courage because a lot of Guyanese have a lot to say to them. In fact, someone was remarking that GPL had turned off, I didn't know about this myself, but had turned off the comment section on their Facebook page. And so the person was advising people to print out all the comments that they had intended to make to GPL and to bring them to the Building Expo. So I don't know if that's going to be done. However, I do know that over 100 people had laughed at that particular post. So it's quite possible that people will do that. Brave GPL, check us out at the Building Expo. I don't know what they're expecting people to say to them or what they're going to say to people, but it should be interesting one way or another. Listen, we know that folks at GPL are doing the best. We know that the attendees, the people representing them at the Building Expo are not the ones causing the blackout. So let's try and take it easy on them, ladies and gentlemen. But let's try and remember that the government is spending huge amounts of money on generating new electricity and not fixing GPL. That's where the focus, or at least one half of the focus, needs to be on it. Otherwise, you'll have cheap electricity, supposedly. But you won't actually have access to that very electricity, which to me seems to be hilarious. Anyway, so that's the Building Expo. We've got a lot to talk about in this Building Expo, folks, because there's a lot of different twists and turns that it has taken. Really surprising some people, actually, and it's something that we gotta have a close look at. So let's take a quick look at. Let's jump to the next slide here, folks, as we continue. So someone said, right now I'm on Shein, looking for a land on the East Bank to buy. Goodness me, folks, goodness. That's a rough one. Shein, as some of you may know, is a discount retailer of clothing outside of going out of China, I believe. And so clearly people are so frustrated by the lack of access to land that they're looking anywhere they can, even if it's at a discount retailer. I think the person is also saying that it might be expensive to purchase land again, which is very true. So yeah, that's difficult. That's difficult. Let's jump across to the next meme here. If we get it. Actually, let's go back. Let's go back. I don't think we have that one up here, but fortunately, I remember it, folks. Folks, we're working hard here. I remember this meme. Someone said that I think we might have put it up last week. Instead of learning to walk, I should have been applying for a house lot in 1998. Gosh, folks, really, really, really difficult time for Guyanese when it comes to housing. But you'll see in a second one of the reasons that this is so difficult. Let's jump across the next slide now. All right, so here we have the president and Minister Crow. They made some remarks. Here are some of the remarks. President highlighted that the housing sector faces challenges like finding land to allocate to citizens. Folks, you mean to tell me that in Guyana, these men can't find land? These men serious? These men serious? And as far as I understand it, the distribution of lands is directly under the purview of the office of the president. These men can't find lands. Who are they trying to? Who are they trying to? Who's the government trying to fool here, man? Really, you can't find lands? You have all sorts of guys who go estates. You couldn't find lands on those estates. Even the Wales site, there's a huge area of land, acres and acres and acres. You couldn't find land there, folks. That's what the government is saying. They can't find land in Guyana, which is one of the least densely populated countries in the entire world. Anyhow, so they went forward and said, he explained the ministry currently has a backlog of about 57,000 applications that have to be processed. And that the government needs another 170 billion to meet those applications. My. Now, folks, they're saying they had a 57,000 backlog. And they're also saying that they processed, I think it was 24,000 house plots. How can it be that they can't seem to keep up with demand? Well, for those of you who may have been watching the show for some time, you recall that I have mentioned previously that the government saying that they need to provide 50,000 house lots seemed to me to be a number where they didn't have a good reading of the situation because we had around 30,000 Venezuelan migrants moved to the country. And so you were already starting at a massive deficit. So clearly they have not assessed the situation correctly. They have not gathered in their mind what actually needs to be done. And they're finding themselves with huge backlogs. And so rather than being able to make a dent, you would have thought this 24,000, you might have shake down this 7,000 number in half. No, you still got a huge backlog. Now, folks, there's only about 550 or so thousand Guyanese adults. You mean to tell me that 1 in every 10 Guyanese adults has an application in there that has not been answered? That's just hilarious. We're gonna go into the way that housing really should probably be dealt with in a second here, folks. But one of the things we want to help you to understand is that it is because they don't do studies. It is because they don't evaluate the situation. It's because they don't check that they find themselves in these quandaries. They find themselves trying to explain the housing backlog by saying that they are struggling to find land. That's how they find themselves in these positions. You would think that the first thing that they would have done in office is to conduct a proper assessment. But instead of promising something in their manifesto, they would have done a proper assessment. And that they would have been able to say, all right, based off of these circumstances and so on, we're moving forward. In fact, if there is a challenge, it should only be a challenge that is a year-to-year challenge. That is to say, something short-term that occurred. But this sounds like a much larger scale challenge, 170 billion needed. This sounds like the type of challenge you face if you didn't plan properly, and therefore you're way behind where you need to be. And so, it's just a classic example of why things can't seem to work right here in good old Guyana. But folks, it doesn't have to be like this. We'll give you an example. Actually, of a country that does a good job with housing, a country that is renowned for doing a good job with its housing. And that country is Singapore. Now, that is a country many of you are familiar with. What we like to think, the way we like to think about the future for Guyana is Singapore plus. That is to say that you're going to have a system where you have low taxes and very strong and robust and prosperous businesses and people are well off. But at the same time, you have a nice social safety net to ensure that citizens, especially the vulnerable and those in need, especially those who might be finding it difficult and continuing to try to work on their studies, are able to be taken care of. We believe that every Guyanese deserves opportunity. We believe that every Guyanese, that no Guyanese should be living in poverty. And we will continue, one, to help to deal directly with poverty alleviation through our programs, and then two, to help Guyanese to be able to move forward in their lives and get better jobs and so on and so forth. So that is our policy philosophy. And whereas the government likes to say they're little Dubai, we like to think about ourselves as being Singapore plus. Now, folks, from that perspective, let's get a sense now. We're just going to do a quick video of what it is, what housing is like in the housing programs are like in Singapore. How does that actually function? So we're going to jump into that, and then on the other side of it, we're going to discuss that.
Public housing is often considered low in quality and high in crime, but it's a totally different story in Singapore. Government-built apartments in Singapore are clean, safe, and well-maintained, and about 80% of Singaporean households live in them. Singapore is also one of the few countries in the world to achieve almost full home ownership status. Over 90% of the city's households own their own homes. But it wasn't always this way. Here's how Singapore fixed its housing problem. In 1959, when Singapore obtained self-governance from the British, the city was having a severe housing crisis, struggling to accommodate its growing population. In 1960, Singapore's first Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, and his government set up the Housing and Development Board, or HDB, a public housing agency with a mission to build rental units for the poor. At the time, many immigrants, including those from Malaysia, were living in unhygienic slums. Amid increasing racial tension between Chinese and Malays, the HDB had a hard time convincing them to leave their informal settlements for new high-rises. Then came the still unexplained fire which broke out in the squatter settlement of Bukit Ho Swee on the 25th of May 1961. An area of 400,000 square metres was razed, 4 people were killed and around 16,000 left homeless. The government successfully rehoused all of the fire victims within a year and built new housing on the site of the disaster in the next 5 years. Its speedy reaction won over the people and paved the way for future public housing projects.
Singapore must be one of the few places in the world where a statutory board satisfactorily completed everything it set out to do in its first 5-year plan.
By 1965, the HDB managed to build over 51,000 apartments, rehousing 400,000 people, a quarter of the then population, solving the housing shortage. Apart from renting out apartments, HDB also started to sell them in 1964. Singaporeans are required to save part of their salaries in a state-managed plan called Central Provident Fund. At first, the fund only provided for retirement. Then, in 1968, the government allowed the use of the fund for housing expenses, helping more people become homeowners. Unlike many other countries, Singapore's public housing is not only for the poor. Instead, it caters to the masses. Citizens within certain income ceilings can buy various types of property, from basic 2-room apartments to upmarket units in condominiums with a swimming pool and a gym. Their prices are usually 20 to 30% cheaper than those in the private market. But you've got to apply and order the apartment first, then wait several years for it to be built. Also, you can't sell it until you finish the 5-year minimum occupation period. Today, HDB has planned, designed and built over 1 million apartments spreading over the city-state. The percentage of people living in public housing has grown from 9% in 1960 to 82% in 2016, and the home ownership rate has also increased rapidly with the rise of Singapore's economy. Singapore's public housing is considered as one of the world's best, but some see it as a way of social control. For instance, quotas ensure a mix of Chinese, Indians and Malays in each HDB block, aiming to carefully integrate ethnic groups and prevent the formation of a volatile racial enclave. But still, a mighty agency with effective policies and strong political will has fixed Singapore's housing crisis and improved the living conditions of millions.
All right, folks, thanks for being looking at that video for a couple of minutes there with us. A couple of things, quite a few things to point out. The first thing that jumps out at me, which I find to be interesting, a little off the topic, but interesting. You had a major fire which burned down 400,000 square feet of housing, and only 4 people died. And yet in Guyana, in one dorm, we've got endless people dying. Isn't that crazy? 400,000 square feet, billions upon billions, and only 4 people died. But in Guyana, we can't keep our children from dying in fires. I am guessing that Singapore would have had a better fire service and structured fire programs as opposed to the sad things that we see in Guyana. Anyway, that's beside the point. The The thing that we want to narrow in on is a couple of important things. So they mentioned actually that there were 50,000, 51,000, I think they mentioned, units in 5 years. First thing they mentioned was that there was a plan. All right, so starting off there, we start off there in a way that's a bit different than how the government likes to operate. Okay, first things first, there was a plan. Second thing is, they mentioned that 400,000 people had been housed. Now, the thing about providing housing as opposed to house lots is that you can provide people house lots and they may not have the credit to borrow from the bank to go and build those same houses. Which is why we've set a rent-to-own scheme where the government will come in, build the homes for you. Then you can rent the home, and as you're paying your rent, that is going towards paying for the home. That is what we have said. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, they've said that citizens are able to save towards their home by going to putting money in a fund. Now, of course, Singapore has had high incomes, a high income for a while now, so citizens will be able to afford that again, or not as much. However, we do have Natural Resources Fund, which has quite substantial resources that can be leveraged to build out this kind of housing. And so we have capacity in terms of finances. We know that there's a need, and this is the appropriate way to deal with it. Singapore was able to deal with it and to produce quality housing. Now, the government may be looking to give out, all right, house lots. But the thing is, unless people are able to actually build there, unless wages are high enough, people can take out the loans, you're comfortable building a home, then you're gonna have a situation where you still have a housing crisis, even though you've given people some house lots. So that to me represents a completely wrong-headed understanding of what's going on, a misreading of the situation that ordinary Guyanese face, especially low-income Guyanese. You know, a lot of folks will owe these various appliances and so on, or chair set and so on, and may have had difficulty repaying, and that may have affected their credit. So as a result, it may find it difficult to be able to borrow to build a home. Those are all things that we have to bear in mind about Guyana and our current circumstances. So, to my mind, a rent-own scheme is a much better way of approaching this, where the government builds these homes. You can even have the government come on a plot of land you own. The government can build a home for you there, and you just have an arrangement where you repay a certain amount of money to the government. And those are all arrangements that could be considered. But the point is, you have to have a structured plan. You have to assess how much of these things need to be done. You need to proceed from that perspective. Now, of course, because the government is not proceeding from that perspective, that structured perspective, they're coming to us now to say that they're struggling to find land. You know, to say that there's nothing left on the East Bank for people. You know, this is just very sad, very sad. But if you thought that was bad, sadly there's even more here to look at that is concerning, even more that is concerning. And so we're gonna jump right into that as well, because now we've got. Let's pull up a picture of the president there. That's the next slide. There we go. So we got the president there. We all know the places on. I guess he was right. If you look closely, you'll see that Jagdeo is giving him the side eye in that particular photo. I don't know if you can see that, audience, but he gets a little bit of a side eye. I don't know why he's getting a side eye, but we'll leave that. We'll leave that. The president, of course, went to the Building Expo opening or whatever it was. Went there with quite a few people, bodyguards and so on, as expected. But citizens have been alarmed by his conduct. Actually, we've been getting reports from PPP members and PPP supporters that when he goes on outreaches, he pulls and pushes people. And someone else today mentioned to me that it's not the first time they've seen him do something like that. I didn't mention it really before because, that's just hearsay necessarily. But now we have evidence before us of the president doing exactly what it is that people have been complaining to us that he's been doing to them. The expression that they use is he's hogodonging them. Does that sound like I made that up? That's an expression that people have been using. But let's look now at what happened at the Building Expo, and you can make up your own mind regarding this particular incident.
There will be a booth designated to that here tonight. So persons who are unemployed and looking to become employed, they can come down here to the Providence National Stadium and they can find out more about how they can improve their skills, how they can become employed, gainfully employed, that is, in whatever sector they may desire, specific fields. There will be a booth designated to that here tonight. So persons who are unemployed and looking to become employed, they can come down here to the Providence National Stadium and they can find out more about how they can improve their skills, how they can become employed, gainfully employed, that is, in whatever sector they may be.
Goodness me, folks. Goodness me. President reaching over and grabbing the person and hauling him, physically hauling him over. As we've said, we've received reports from PUP supporters and PUP party members that this is the way the president has been conducting himself on outreaches. Now we're seeing in the full face of the public him grabbing and shoving people, grabbing and shoving someone, just as we received those reports. Now, folks, the other thing that we want to point out to you, I don't know if you saw it or you missed it, but the former U.S. ambassador was right there as well, former Ambassador Lynch. It is fortunate that he did not accidentally hit Ambassador Lynch to the ground, but you can kind of see from her facial expression or from her body language that she herself is a bit surprised. And you've actually seen citizens on social media comment that the ambassador looked surprised. Now, if this were just a random minister, you would say that this is bad enough. And even if it wasn't, the ambassador wasn't there, you should say that the minister should not be conducting themselves in that way. That is unprofessional behavior, or that's not appropriate behavior if the president or if anyone had an issue with the security. You're supposed to alert whoever's in charge of security, and they're supposed to go and deal with it. Why are you physically grabbing someone and pulling them like that? That to me is pretty alarming. That's the first thing. The second thing is this is the head of state of Guyana. Now, one of the things I remark to people who intend to go to the Business Expo is if you're going to go to the expo and you're going to be near to the president, I'd suggest that you be kind of cautious, because if you get in his way, maybe he's going to grab you and shove you out of the way. Because apparently that's something that he does. We have received reports before that this is how this man conducts himself. And here he is in front of the former US ambassador, hauling and shoving somebody like that. Folks, let's bring back up this image, and I want you to look closely at what happens here. Let's bring this back up.
So construction in specific fields, there will be a booth designated to that here tonight. So persons who are unemployed and looking to become employed, they can.
Goodness me. That is the way the president's conducted. The ambassador is right there. You can see her toward the middle of the screen. Yeah, she's looking away as if, she's looking towards the president there as if astonished, I mean, I don't know if that's what's going on, but you can kind of get that impression. Then you see the president talking aggressively that I don't know if that's someone from his security staff or so on. But what he should have done is to speak directly with that security staff first and have them deal with the situation. What is he doing grabbing that person? That seems strange to me. I would also say, I mean, when you're growing up, don't your parents say that you should use your words when you have a problem? Why do you need to engage in that kind of a? It is also mentioned that if that's the way he's treating his security, can you imagine how he might treat somebody who is not his security? These are all questions. Someone is also saying, I think I see another minister, that is that Parag or one of the other ministers is there as well. The other question to ask yourself as well, folks, is if this is the way the president is conducting himself on camera, what is it that we do not see? Is he conducting himself similarly off camera? We don't know. Look at this, grabs that man. The man nearly fall down. He nearly hit the ambassador. I mean, let me put it another way to you folks. Name for me another time that you've seen a head of state do something like that. I can't name any instance of it, I can't name any off the top of my head. Look at this. He grabs this man. Now, this man, let us remember, I am presuming, is a citizen of Guyana. He is entitled to be treated with respect. This man is a voter. This man is a member of our society. What is the president doing acting in this way? Now, folks, you ever hear that expression, your parents may say to you, or folks, those of your parents will say to your children, what you do at home is what you got to practice because you're going to do the wrong thing on the road. Now, if I had to guess, I would be concerned that he's been doing this with PUP, as we have been told, he's been doing this with PUP members. And now that the camera is on him, he didn't realize that the camera was on him and he shouldn't do the same thing that he's been doing. Because people have been complaining to us that the president has been pushing them and shoving them around. And now we have here in front of ministers of government, in front of the nation, in front of the US ambassador, pulling and shoving people. Look at that. Very interesting, folks. But, you have to ask yourself, what does this say about the president? What does this say about the PUP? What does this say about the way that they believe that citizens should be treated? It is very concerning. It has alarmed me. But as I said before, we didn't say anything about what we'd heard before because, there wasn't really any evidence necessarily of him acting in this way. But now it really brings to light what some people were concerned about, which is his way that he's been operating. Now, we are not inclined to believe any and everything about somebody. People make all kinds of allegations. We take them in stride. We think about them. But we can no longer apply skepticism when people say that they're being pushed and shoved by the president frequently. This is very alarming. Now, I would hope, and many Guyanese have called for the president to apologize. I don't know that the president will apologize. I'm waiting to see that, but I think that would be appropriate. At the very least, that would be appropriate. You can even see the ministers there looking kind of confused, or in shock. My, what an incident. What an incident. Now, we've even got some commentary that folks have been saying. Let's bring up some commentary because there's someone, I believe this person is working for the DPI. If I'm incorrect, I guess I could be incorrect. But someone has put out some commentary trying to defend the person under Melly Mel who posted this video. I don't usually comment a lot on things on Facebook, but on this occasion, I was accompanying the president on the walkthrough. The crowd was closing in, and His Excellency pulled away the security to avoid a conflict that was evidently brewing. Knowing the president, he is not a fan of citizens being prevented from having access to him. So here's my question. Is this person trying to say that the security was preventing someone from greeting the president? Was he preventing the ambassador perhaps from greeting the president? All right, but does that mean the president should conduct himself in that way? Number one. Number two, the security, this is another thing, the security is there the president is trying to pull the security person away from some sort of a conflict that was brewing. First things first, it is, and I could be wrong, folks, you correct me. I was under the impression that it's the security's job to deal with any conflict and that they are there to prevent the president from being involved in that conflict. What is the president doing? Pulling security away so that they are not involved. That's not a security job. I don't understand what's going on here. Now, of course, citizens, not just people, other citizens. Let's go to the next slide here, folks. Let's go to the next slide. So here we've got somebody saying conflict brewing between which parties? And then someone said as well, guys, I don't wonder myself. I had to watch it from every angle to see this evidently brewing conflict. Folks, this is just, to my mind, embarrassing. I am personally embarrassed that our head of state is acting that way right in front of a former ambassador. But more than that, I think I'm a little offended as a Guyanese that people are being treated this way. And that we're seeing firsthand evidence, of people being treated this way. This is not acceptable, and the president should apologize, and he should conduct himself in a better way in the future. I don't know that he will, but I can say that this is not acceptable for any head of state to be conducting themselves in that way. So I would hope that he'll issue an apology. I don't know if they'll come now and tell us that it's not the president that did the video. That's what we're waiting for now. But yeah, so obviously a lot of Guyanese were disturbed by that. Right at the Building Expo, it started off by saying that they can't find land for you to get your house lot, and ended up with pushing and shoving citizens of Guyana. Goodness me. All right, folks. Just as a last word on that, I just want to remind you that if you come across the president of the Building Expo, please exercise some caution. I would hate for him to put or shove you out of his way. We don't want that to happen. All right, let's jump across to the next topic here, folks. So, folks, you know this jumpy bird. Goodness me. Some people may like it. Some people have dubbed it the jumpy bird. I personally, it's not to my taste. But really, I don't think it's the government's taste either. One of the reasons we come back to this jumpy bird is because what we find out with the government is that these guys are not fond of due diligence, checking things, being thorough. And as I've said previously on this show, I'm pretty sure that they never saw this bird before it was installed. They never saw the bird. It was just installed, and then it was too late for them to take it down before they had to open the new Mandela Highway and reveal the bird. This idea that they will just do stuff without checking, and then it'll be too late for them to retract it. This is something that happens quite often. Folks, you may recall our conversation around the oil insurance that Guyana had, the oil spill insurance. And you may recall there being some controversy about the insurance being provided to the court in the course of a court case, where the insurance said Egypt and not Guyana. And where the judge, I've gone over those remarks many times over, the judge indicated that the EPA never even checked the insurance to see whether it was the appropriate insurance. And of course, if you don't check it, that's how you end up with an insurance that says Egypt and not Guyana. Of course, I could be wrong, but I consulted with a few lawyers. They think that it's problematic. Nonetheless, that is one perspective on it. But folks, as we now continue in oil and gas matters, some of you may recall that about a week ago at the press conference, I made some remarks on behalf of the opposition regarding the relinquishment of some blocks. We spoke about this on our last show as well. And really, the situation has continued to develop. So I wanted to mention it to you again. In fact, there's more developments that are particularly important. Well, one of the things that we said then was that while Exxon saying that they would need another year before they relinquish blocks that they're due to relinquish in another month or so, that them saying that that's due to COVID might be a reasonable reason. Now these blocks are potentially have a billion, maybe 2 billion barrels of oil in them, as much as 50 years of Trinidad's oil production. So we're talking about potentially huge amounts of oil. But I think what we remarked is that it's perfectly reasonable that COVID-19 would have caused some delays. What we need to see is some assessment, some due diligence be released by the government. Now, you think that something like that, the government would come back and say, we agree that due diligence needs to have been conducted. We conducted due diligence. Here is the due diligence. Boom. Story done. Everybody goes home satisfied. But no, the government said they don't want to talk about that. Of course, we saw the AFC come out and say that Exxon's operations were not inhibited by COVID because they were classified as an essential service. Now, it's possible that even if you're an essential service, you may have still been affected. As an example, I was pointed out in the media that I think it was some 14 members of one of the drill ships caught COVID and had to quarantine and so on and so forth. All right, no problem. But the crux of it is you need to have an evaluation. The government, in attempting to distract from this issue, which picked up a lot of pace and concerned a lot of people, pointed out that former President Granger is the one who granted this extension. They put up the letter with him granting the extension. Well, the first paragraph in the letter of the agreement indicated that, guess what, folks? Guess what it indicated? That you have to conduct some due diligence to check to see whether or not the operator has been affected and if you need to adjust this extension. That is to say, more or less, exactly what we said at the press conference. So in trying to distract from the issue, in trying to defend themselves, to say, oh, it's Granger is not them, they also released information which said that they should do exactly the same thing we said that they should do. But you know what's my question? And I want you to think about this for a second. Viewers, you think before those people release those letters, trying to defend themselves and blame Granger, you think they read that letter before they released it? Or just like this jumpy bird, they didn't check? Who would release a letter which in its contents is going to put you even more on the hot seat? I thought they would say something like, Granger did it, ask him, and then Granger would have to come and defend himself. But they release a whole letter, and the first part of the letter says, you're supposed to conduct the due diligence that we said that you're supposed to conduct. So now at the press conference, when confronted with this information, what do they say? Oh yes, we did indeed conduct some due diligence. They could have avoided all of this if they had just said, we agree with the opposition. You must conduct due diligence. We did conduct the due diligence. Here is the due diligence. Could have avoided it all. Now, there's some people who will say that this is because they're extremely corrupt, and therefore they can't say that they're conducting due diligence. There's other people who may say that they're just not checking anything. And so just as they didn't check the jumpy bird, they didn't check the letter that they released to try and defend themselves. I mean, come on. Now, the other side of this is, what we have said is not just that you must do due diligence. We said that you must release the due diligence. And of course, the government says, no, they're not releasing that. Folks, let me ask you something. Do you believe that they did due diligence? Do you believe that? If they are releasing a letter to try and throw the burden on the opposition and create a controversy and blame the opposition, and they're not even reading the letter they're releasing, you think these people are checking to see whether or not Exxon is telling them the truth, the facts, whether it's appropriate, whether the timeline needs to be adjusted? According to the letter that was released, it seems, and this is the point out in the media, that they should have done about a dozen reviews. Do they have a dozen reviews to come and show people? Do they have that available? Folks, it is unbelievable that we continue to have a government that doesn't want to do the basics. Basic, uncontroversial things. Uncontroversial. Why is it that there's a whole big tra-la-la, over this, when it is such a simple thing? Now some will say that's because these guys are corrupt. So they can't agree that due diligence must be done. Some will say that that is what is really going on. Now, of course, you've seen in the papers some seriously aggressive attacks on the government because people are concerned. We saw in the paper one person say that it's criminal that these blocks are being Exxon's being allowed to keep these blocks. Let's go over to the next slide as we continue to discuss this issue. Let's go over to the next slide. All right, here we have a saying, due diligence. Can't be the country is run. We need to see an evaluation that needs to be public. Very basic. Now they're coming up to say, oh, they did an evaluation, but they're not going to release it. Folks, if you did an evaluation, why aren't you releasing it? What's the big deal? What's the problem? The company has come up publicly to say some of its drill ships were excuse me there, folks. Some of its drill ships were affected. Wasn't able to bring in staff as much as possible. This information generally is public. Why won't you just release your due diligence? What's the big deal? But the thing is, really, they're supposed to release 12 separate bits of due diligence because that's what the extension stipulated. That quarterly they would be reviewing this situation. Now, I mean, I don't know about you, but I personally don't believe they have 12 separate items of due diligence to show the guidance people. I could be wrong, but I'd be pretty surprised if they had 12 separate reviews to show the guidance people. That's very interesting. Anyway, so that's one part of it. Let's jump across. Go to the next slide as we continue. So this is the starting block here. 20% of which is due to be returned to the Guyanese people in October. Of course, you've seen that deadline pushed back by a year based off this discussion. To my mind, it's perfectly reasonable that there would have been interruption. As I said, we need an evaluation. As an example, we need an evaluation to tell us whether a year is the appropriate period of time. Now, it could be that 3 months is appropriate. It could be that 6 months is appropriate. It could be 9 months. Our information coming out of the Department of Energy is that because of the high degree of uncertainty around COVID, they provided a year as their timeline. They figured that within a year, you'd have some clarity regarding COVID. But they included a provision for review. Now, folks, if there are workers who had to be quarantined, what was quarantining during COVID? A couple of weeks, right? Does that mean you're supposed to get a whole year's extension? If you were unable to bring in as many workers as you would have liked, what kind of manpower hours did you lose? That's a reasonable question to ask. If your drilling ships were delayed, were they delayed by an entire year or were they delayed by a few months? These are questions to ask. Now, it is perfectly reasonable that there were delays and that an extension is required. But what is also reasonable is that there should be due diligence and an evaluation. That is perfectly reasonable. For the government to be, we're not going to even talk about due diligence. And then when we apply the pressure, we did due diligence, but we're not going to tell you what due diligence we did. I mean, come on. This is uncontroversial. Why are we fighting over this? There are things I can understand we disagree. But you mean that we disagree over whether or not you should check to see whether what people are telling you is the truth? That's what we're disagreeing about? You mean to tell me we're disagreeing that if they say that there were drill ships that they had a problem with, that we shouldn't check and see whether or not these drill ships are affected and how much they were affected and get a sense of it? You mean to tell me that that is what we're fighting over? Goodness, folks, goodness. But that is the path that we're being led down by the PEP. Now let's jump across to the next slide. We're going to come back to these blocks. Let's jump across to the next slide here, folks, as we continue. So here we have the most recent article on this. This is the most recent front page. And here you see Jagdeo Defense clinches 1 year extension. Then you see another one where Trotman challenges government to declare Exxon contract null and void due to criminality. Of course, Jagdeo said the contract is that Trotman's conduct was criminal, without providing any evidence that it was criminal. And of course, he's walked back those comments to say that it was criminally negligent. Now, of course, people will ask, all right, is there a probe into this since you're saying that it's criminally negligent? And what is it? What do you think that the PEP is? That there's a probe? There's no probe. They're saying, if you could provide evidence, then we'll probe. And I'm thinking to myself, you are the one who said it was criminally negligent, not the newspaper. Why are you asking the newspaper to provide evidence? You were supposed to be doing an investigation. I mean, unbelievable. And at the bottom of the paper there, you may notice that there's an indication. We've talked about the $214 million that the first audit of the commission indicated might be able to recover. And Jagdeo has now indicated that's been reduced to 11 million. Reduced from 214 million to 11 million. I find that to be very interesting. We're gonna go into depth on that in another show, folks. We don't have the time to do that right now, but we're gonna go into depth on that in another show. But folks, as we continue to talk about the importance of basic good governance, let's jump across to the next slide. As we continue to talk about the importance of basic good governance. Now, you may recall that I said this previously. In our last show, I made these remarks. You may recall those remarks. You may find them interesting. Which is where the CEO of Hess, I believe, said during COVID, we really had a force majeure period because Exxon couldn't even get workers in the country. We couldn't run 3 rigs for exploration. So we took that exploration drilling pause. All right. Now, here's what I find interesting. So here's what Chadwick said at this press conference. Exxon brought in information and gave a full report to the Ministry of Natural Resources on how their original exploration plan was affected from 6 rigs down to 4 because 2 could not be mobilized. Now, Piaggio was saying 2 rigs could not be mobilized. But the operator is saying 3 rigs could not be mobilized. Folks, you understand why they have to check these things? So which is it? Is it 2 or is it 3? I don't know. What I know is that you're supposed to check. I don't know whether it is more rigs, less rigs, what the problems were, but I know the government is supposed to check. Did the government check? Did they just say, oh, well, I guess sure, I guess sure? Or did they actually do a proper investigation of this? Did they evaluate this? What were the factors involved? Did they look at the manpower, how that was affected, how the drilling campaign was affected? Did they look at delays? What did they do? Because right here, just in comments that people are making, you're seeing a discrepancy in terms of what actually happened. Jaguar said 2 rigs. The operator said 3 rigs. Which is it? This is why due diligence is necessary. It's not because we just want to harass people. It's not because we don't like the operator, we don't like the government. It's because this is normal good governance. You need to have clarity as to what the facts are. You need to evaluate what happened. And you need to make a decision which, once made, can be justified, can be put out to the public, can satisfy Guyanese, and can stand up to scrutiny. It should not be that you are refusing to release your reports. With respect to the opposition's call for reports of such due diligence to be made public, Vice President said there is no need for the government to do this. Wow. Chief policymaker was also not inclined to make government reports on this matter public to ease tensions of other stakeholders. If there is no issue, if due diligence was done, then they should release that due diligence. But I'll tell you what I expect to see. I expect to see in that due diligence an explanation as to why one person is saying 2 rigs and another person is saying 3 rigs. And there could be some explanation, some confusion, somebody misspoke. Perfectly reasonable. But I expect to see an explanation. I mean, come on, guys. This is what we're fighting over. Basic things like this. But is this the first time that on this show we've had to bring up issues that shouldn't be controversial, that are controversial? Folks, and I give my operator a second just to bring up back that jumpy bird. Just if the operator can bring up back that jumpy bird for us here. If the operator can bring up back that jumpy bird. It should not be controversial. But if you're going to unveil a monument which is supposed to symbolize the Guyanese economy taking flight, that you'd want to have a monument which people would not criticize. A monument that at very least people would say that looks good or it looks reasonable. People would say that. Instead of putting forward a monument where it looks like you didn't even check the monument, that's controversial. But that's the whole way the government is being run, where things that shouldn't be controversial are controversial. Now, some people may like this particular word, some people may like it. I don't particularly think that it's appropriate. I think that a different word wouldn't be appropriate. That's just my feeling of it and the feeling that's been expressed by a lot of guys. But what I'm getting at is, it should not be that every guy who's in the heart of heart thinks that you don't check the basic things. Now let's go to the map of the established block, just to hit home some perspective of this for you guys. You're looking at 20% of that block that has to be given up. 20%. Potentially billions of barrels, potentially as much as 50 years of Trinidad oil production. And you're going to come and tell me that you don't need to do due diligence, or it's no biggie. And then when you're pressed on it and you put your back against the corner, you come out and say, oh yeah, we did do some due diligence, but we ain't going to tell you what we did. This is 50 years worth of Trinidad oil production. Everybody in Guyana will be rich from that alone. And you are out here telling us, oh, trust us. When you released a letter trying to attack the opposition, say, oh, it's Granger do this. You didn't even read the letter you released, and you put yourself in more hot water. And we are supposed to believe that you did due diligence. Show us the due diligence. Folks, you know, we face this sad, frustrating situation day after day. You know that we're talking about huge amounts of money here, billions and billions of dollars, and yet government doesn't seem to get it, folks. Some people may say that they're extremely corrupt. Some people may say that their incompetence knows no bounds. All I'm saying is, I don't know who in Guyana would disagree with the idea that on a basic level, you should just check and verify stuff. You know, funny to be quoting Ronald Reagan, but he, I believe, used to say, trust but verify. No problem, all right. It is not that we're saying that these blocks should be taken away from Exxon. We're not saying that, at least that the APNU is not saying that. What we're saying is, do some proper evaluations. I mean, okay. Folks, on that note, we're going to close. You know, it's always very frustrating that we have to deal with these types of things. This issue didn't need to be an issue. The government could have just said, we agree with the opposition. What Elson said is correct, and we will conduct some due diligence. Instead, you had something like, I don't know, 7 articles in 7 days on this topic, creating a whole firestorm. That was necessary. That is the way the government is running it. They're going to continue to find themselves in problems because of the way they're governing. Because you didn't need me to come and say that. Anybody on the road could have told you to do some basic due diligence. But as what people say, if you don't want to hear it, it's gone for you. And on that note, folks, thank you for tuning in again for the lowdown, and you have a good rest of the evening.